Hi, I'm Liz Coley. Welcome back to Undercover Reading. We're reading The Captain's Kid. We have just hit a very tragic point. Chapter 8, Part 6. Dad locked his arm tight around me like I would fall over if he let go. He didn't know how true that was, and even though he was shooting off heat from every part of his body, I was cold, chilled to the bone, numb. I shivered against Dad as we sat on a bench in the health center waiting for news of Masuna. My fault, of course. I set this disaster in motion. I wanted to confess to Dad. God knows how much I wanted to tell him that I'd meant it for the best, that I'd been trying to do something amazing for them, and River Swift and Masuna had reconciled in that beautiful, frozen moment. I tried to hold that image in my mind instead of the last one. How I wanted to tell Dad that River Swift had changed and that I made it happen. But if I was responsible for that, then I was responsible for everything else too. I couldn't say anything. All the words I knew had curled up and blown away like dead leaves. The buzz in my ears drowned out the silence around me. My eyes had emptied and my cheeks were stiff with dried salt. I stared at the single brown spot on the floor, the same color as the blood caking my clothes. My chest ached as if the knife had lodged there instead. Did I wish it had? My mind veered away, far, far away from those dark and dangerous thoughts. At some point, a med tech came in and talked quietly to Dad. The words washed past me like a foreign language. Then Dad lifted me by the arm and walked me, robot-like, to our quarters. He dialed the shower to maximum heat. "Take as long as you need," he said. "I'll be in the sitting room." I stood under the needles of scalding water until the shivers stopped and my skin shone scarlet. When my knees buckled, I stepped out and wrapped myself in a thick towel. I didn't have a mark on me. Not on the outside. The pile of blood-stained clothes was gone, and Dad had left me a new set to put on. Clean, folded shirt and trousers. I don't think I could have made a decision of that magnitude right now. His face was buried in his hands, elbows on knees, back arched against his tight uniform. At the sound of my step, he looked up with weary, ancient eyes. "Do you want to talk?" he asked. I opened my mouth, hoping, but nothing came out. I closed my lips and shook my head. The constant buzzing changed pitch. "Okay, later then." He walked me back into my room and tucked me under the thermal sheet. I'd lost all track of time. Wasn't it morning yet? He rubbed the nape of my neck until I let go my grip on consciousness and fell into a dreamless sleep. When I roused, a heavy feeling hung over me. I checked my watch comm. It was past noon. For the most wonderful, happiest, split a second, I imagined it was 7-day, and I had just woken from a horrible nightmare. Then the vivid memory downloaded to the front of my brain with full-depth graphics and ran again and again in slow motion. Someone whimpered. Me. Under the covers, I retreated back into sleep. A hand woke me. "Hey, Spidey, I brought you a tray. You should eat a little." When the heart is sad. My voice came out scratchy and hoarse. "What time is it?" "Breakfast time, kiddo," Dad said. I thought I saw noon?" "Breakfast on Tuesday," Dad clarified. "You slept all the way round." "Oh, okay." I sat up and my head spun. "I feel awful. Inside and out." "So do I, kiddo. So do I." Dad rubbed his hair with one hand. "Anna's doing pretty well, considering. She's still very shaken, of course, but her arm isn't paining her any longer." "Good." I didn't want to see her yet. I wouldn't know what to say. I guess I missed school yesterday? So everyone knows already, right?" I swung my feet around to the floor. Dad perched beside me. "They know about the deaths, but not the details. Certainly not that you were involved. Jan told the other kids you had a project to do for me." Certainly not that I was involved. Certainly not that I'd opened the door to chaos. Certainly not that River Swift had died in my arms. I wrapped those guilty arms around my shivering, skinny body. Dad was still talking. Anna is leading a traditional memorial service for the fallen. I thought you'd want to come. Of course I do, I said. If only I could be there invisibly. River Swift saved my life. It should have been me. Dad looked at the ceiling. Would have, he corrected. Not should have. You were protecting Masuna. He was protecting you, which was my job. I wish I'd gotten there faster so it wouldn't have been necessary. I finally voiced the question I'd never had time to ask. Why were you there? I thought you were asleep. Did you? His lips tightened. You can answer the same question for me in a moment. I was there because I placed a routine security trace on your missing watchcom, so we'd know if it broadcast a signal. It seemed rather strange that it hadn't turned up yet. When we traced a burst to River Swift's cell, we figured it to be a prearranged signal. So of course my mind ran to a third uncaptured saboteur. The last person I was expecting to find in attendance at this planned assassination was my son. It wasn't supposed to be an assassination, I protested. It was just supposed to be a meeting. River Swift had come around to the Sequayuno's perspective, and he wanted to help. Everything had to be worked out before we landed. Time was running out, but I had no idea that Weisinger would come. And my throat closed. A meeting. In the middle of the night. I get the feeling there's a lot you haven't told me, Brandon. I raised eyes brimming with guilt. Kiddo, why didn't you tell me what you'd gotten involved in? I didn't think you'd believe me or understand. I started to try once, and well, you cut me off. Told me the authorities, the diplomats had it all worked out. Didn't see any room for discussion after that. Dad's face sagged. I'm sorry, Brandon. He clamped my hand between his. I hate to think I was so unapproachable you had to turn to someone who'd already tried to kill you several times. He didn't actually try to kill me, I said meekly. Somehow I exceeded his plans. So you say. In any case, he more than atoned for it at the end. I hope he found some peace in that. Me too. Then there was respectful silence for a bit while Dad and I thought our own thoughts. I couldn't even look at the food he'd brought, so I showered again and dressed in black trousers and a long-sleeved black shirt. Dad and I got to the chapel a few minutes early, but already a crowd waited to pay their last respects to two men they hadn't even known, prisoners at that. Anna spoke about the paths people's lives take and how far from home they can lead. Then she spoke a few sentences I couldn't understand, and I realized they must be in the Aboriginal language of her people. Miss Jan finished the ceremony with a simple pentatonic melody on her flute. Masuna slipped away before I could tell her anything. Miss Jan led the students back to class. Mo hung behind and came back to where I was hovering with Dad. Hey, Band-Aid, he said. Just let me know if you want to copy my notes. He studied my face with an intensity that said he wanted to say more, but couldn't, at least not there and then. I'll see you. Dad patted my shoulder. Good boy, that kid. No one's expecting you to go back to school today or even for the rest of the week if you need time. That was a relief. I couldn't face Karthik's questions right now. He knew enough to guess. Thanks, Dad. Maybe tomorrow? Dad gestured to the bench behind the weeping cherry tree. We sat in the piece of the garden as everyone else left. I leaned against his shoulder, wishing I could absorb his strength and experience and perspective. I was so exhausted. It was tempting to let it all go. Forget my plans. Let the authorities roll on. But I knew I couldn't. I burned the image of River Swift's and Masuna's hands clasped tight together, united in a common purpose. I imagined mine wrapped around theirs. Hope had lived for this sliver of time. Weitzinger's hatred had dropped it in its tracks. But River Swift had charged me to carry on, anointed me in his blood. The task to raise new hope was all mine. I had to honor his last request. It had begun as mine, after all. And that's the end of this section. Please come back.